Yay, push the right button. Okay, our agenda today, I've already done pretty much the introduction. I wanted to give you some context. Most of the 7 sessions are going to be very biblically related. Last Sunday, we did references to Turkey in the Bible, so we talked about Noah, we talked about Abraham, we talked about Jeremiah, and various incidences that had occurred in Turkey that were in the Old Testament. I'm going to step back now and give you some context of Turkish history, and also talk to you about our various trips to Turkey. When people ask, you've been many places in the world, where's your favorite place to go, which is always a tough question. So pretty much my stock answer is one of my favorite places to visit is Turkey. Archaeology, geology, history, all of those things, and the biblical references that we have in Turkey as well. So, and then I want to talk about the empires throughout the ages. I ended up with a list of 9 or 10 different empires over the last 4,000 years, and I always have to go and figure it out each time if I'm reading parts of the Old Testament, which kingdom, which empire was Darius, which empire was Cyrus. So we're going to go and look at some of those, and then very briefly look at the empires that evolved after the New Testament times. And then I'm going to step back prior to next week. Next week we don't have a class. Next week is the congregational meeting, so service is at 10 o'clock. So 2 weeks from now, we'll start Paul's first missionary journey, which was focused entirely in Turkey, not to Greece until the second one. So we're going to spend a lot of time in Turkey with Paul. The following week, 2 weeks from now, then the week after that, we'll do the second missionary journey, and the week after that, we'll do the third missionary journey. So there was no fourth missionary journey, so you have to guess what we might talk about after that. Okay, our trips to Turkey. The first one was in November of 1999, following our trip to Israel. We went from Israel up to Greece and spent 3-4 days in Athens, and then we got on one of those Mediterranean cruise ships to do a couple of the Greek Isles. And if you're on one of those ships, I think they always, at least go to Ephesus, which is their only port of call in Turkey. So the first 2 times I was there, that's all I saw of Turkey was Ephesus. And that trip was organized by our former pastor from Ohio, Rick Carnes. And by that time, we had moved out here, and he had moved to a church in Las Vegas. And his church had organized a tour, and he invited us to go with them. So that was a special time for us. Then some of you, Gary was one of the organizers of the trip in 2010, Footsteps of St. Paul. Again, we did Greece, then we finished up with the cruise in the Greek Isles and our one-day trip into Ephesus. We didn't even overnight either time in Turkey. So that one was led by Pastor David Sparks, and his ministry is Footstep Ministries out of Texas is where he's based. In September of 2012, we did a trip called Treasures of Turkey, and this was a trip starting in Istanbul, ending in Ankara, which is the capital city, and it was about a 17-day trip, and was run by Odyssey Unlimited. That's an active American tourist line, and we had the best guide, I think, ever on that trip. A gentleman by the name of Solly. I probably knew at one time what his last name was, but it's long gone from my mind. I don't have it written down anyplace. But he was educated his degree is in ancient writings. So, and every place we went, he was able to talk about, all the different things from an ancient perspective as well as modern perspective. We would ask him once in a while, are you going to give us a bibliography of all these references that you have? And he says, yes, but I do it at the end of the tour because I want to customize it to the group, what I have talked with you about. And at the end of the tour, true to his word, he gave us a list of 88 references. So, and he was a Muslim, but he was just as conversant in the scriptures, the Old Testament and the New Testament, so he could speak to all of our different traditions. Great.
On one of your maps here, it shows Turkey and all the places around the water in more areas. But is it not populated in the middle at all, or?
It is populated in the middle, and I'm going to address that a little bit.
I was curious.
Yeah, it is very much so, including the capital is in the central part. Mm-hmm. But there's also, to be honest, there's a lot of open land, and part of that's because a lot of it's very mountainous.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure what the population of Turkey is. I'm gonna guess maybe 60 million, maybe a little more than that, 60 to 80 million. But Istanbul itself is 17 million.
Oh.
So, or at least it was 6 years ago when we were there, so it's probably more now. In May of 2019, we did in Paul's footsteps. This one started in the southeastern part of the country at a city called Adana, and it went from there to Istanbul, and that was with Tutku Travel, Turkish travel organization that worked in conjunction with the Biblical Archaeology Society to put on this trip. And our leader was Pastor Mark Wilson. Last week I gave you some references, and his was the first one on there for the, good morning, Karen. Okay, we got and a Turkish Delight as well.
Well, I just got back from Saudi Arabia, so I know.
You know all about that, okay.
But by the way, the population of Turkey is just over 85 million.
85 million,
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
Okay.
I show 87,890.
Fact checking my class, huh? Okay. Yeah, so he wrote the book Biblical Turkey, and it's not a tour guide type of book. Really, it types each town. It kind of goes in chronological order as the Bible would lay things out, and talks about the different towns. So some of the information I got and shared with you last week on the city of Ur would have come from his book, and so that one sits very close to me as I'm putting all these slides together. His particular interest is in Roman roads and the transportation. You know, we know about Paul's missionary journey and how much, land he covered, but he had to walk all of that. And so Mark has been trying to, see what roads he would have gone on. And so I'll get into this a lot when we get into the missionary journeys, but what pathways would Paul, travel to get from one place to another? And then coming up in May this year, we'll be going back to Turkey for the Cradles of Civilization. I don't know who will be leading that yet. It is a tour from
It'll be you.
Oh, no. Because there are some areas that I know nothing about that's going to be on this tour. It's Istanbul to Athens, 23 days. So we'll be doing Turkey, get over to Cappadocia, come back, do Crete, and up the islands, Greek islands, to Athens.
Cool.
The company that organizes that is Albatross Tours. We've done, this will be our 4th tour with them. We've done 3 Christmas tours with them. And they're a group out of Australia. So it was fun doing Christmas tours with Australians, many of whom at our age had never seen snow before. And those who were slightly younger than we are, people in their 50s and 60s were out there making snow angels, going on toboggans. The few that were my age were going, I don't like ice.
So in September or October, we should expect another continuation of this class, maybe a little bit?
Possibly.
Maybe? All right.
But the one area I know they'll be spending time on that I am not an expert at is Gallipoli, because their Australians will be spending, I think, 3 days in the Gallipoli area. So here's a couple of pictures, our pictures from
The shelves
Ephesus.
are empty.
Hmm?
The shelves are empty.
Yes, they are. And it's pretty much a facade. If you walk into the building, you're at the back end. So it's pretty much a facade. I think we like to think that, if we're walking in Ephesus, we're seeing what Paul saw, which in a lot of the cases would be true. But the library of Celsus, which Ephesus is famous for, wasn't built until the 2nd century, so at least 60 years after Paul had been there. So, but it's still a very fascinating building. Just walking around Ephesus, we've been to other archaeology sites. We've walked in Jerusalem, and Ephesus is one of those places that you feel like you understood how people would live there. Because you're walking down the street this way, you take a turn, and over here are the public toilets, and you take another turn, and you've got the library in front of you. Once you get to the library, you take a right-hand turn, you're walking down the road that would have led to the harbor and to the amphitheater. So you really have a sense of, a city as opposed to just a place where they've dug up some pillars. And this is the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. When we go with Paul, we'll talk more about that. But it was Artemis that the silversmiths, the souvenir vendors, would make little statues to sell, and there were statues of Artemis. And this was what Paul objected to, and the goldsmiths weren't real happy with his objections because he was, ruining their business. So
Who is Artemis?
she was the goddess of wisdom, I think. Certainly was one of the goddesses of the Greeks.
One quick addition. Rob Hagan brought this to life to me when he said, instead of silversmiths with their figurines, think washing machines.
Okay.
They're destroying my business.
If Paul would, argue against washing machines. And I bet there were people who did when they first were introduced. And there is the amphitheater. And
I remember being there.
yeah, you remember being there? Yeah, well, we were there in 2010, and some of you were with us on that trip. We gathered in a little area over there in the right-hand side, and we sang Amazing Grace. Do any of you remember doing that?
I bet the sound was amazing. You know.
Well, we did have some good choir people with us.
Who led that tour, the John?
That was David Sparks.
See, that's why, that's,
Yeah.
we were on one.
Now, this is carved out of the mountain, or is this blocks laid down? Do you know?
This is primarily rocks laid down, certainly for the theater itself, but it is backed up into a hillside,
Okay.
so there probably is support from the hill.
'Cause I know some of them were just carved right into it.
Yes, yeah. This, yeah, I think it's a combination of both, that they're getting the support out of the hillside. The Treasures of Turkey, this is where we went places besides Ephesus. As I said, we started in Istanbul. We flew, that's a good 500-600 miles, down to Gaziantep and spent a couple days there. And then over to Urfa, or its official name is Senli Urfa. And that's where we talked last week about where in the Islamic tradition, that's where Abraham was born. You can see the cave that they say he was born in. And scholars argue whether this was actually the real site of Ur, or as was discussed in the early 20th century, was it further down on the Persian Gulf. So that's still an ongoing scholarly debate. And then there's a third point of view on that one, which is Abraham was completely mythological being, and so he wouldn't have a birthplace anyways. So that's a third point of view. We went from Urfa up to Cappadocia, fascinating geological area. You'll see a picture of that here in a second. And then we went up to Ankara, and they have a really fascinating archaeological museum there. We spent a lot of time looking at various artifacts from around the country at that place. This is our guide Sully on the left-hand side, and that's pretty much how he looked most of the time. He had a big smile, very exuberant, a great guide. The mosaic is from Gaziantep, and it was a fairly new museum back in 2012, probably within the last 5 to 10 years. And fortunately, it was modern enough building that they had done a lot of earthquake protection on it, so the museum was not damaged in that horrific earthquake. Was it 5 years or so ago?
Something
The
like that.
epicenter was at Gaziantep, so. This is, how many remember the only Turkish word that we learned last week?
Something about mountain.
Rock.
Doggy?
Mountain.
Doggy? I'm not saying doggy. Doggy? Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the Nemrut doggy, and it was a tomb area that was constructed in the 1st century BC, and it's at about 7,000 feet, so it really is up a mountain, and you've just got these massive heads up there. I'd say they're probably maybe 50 feet high, something like that.
Reminds
So
me of
they're-
Easter Island.
What was,
It does. It looks a lot like Easter
what was the
Island.
date?
1st century BC. Wow. I was actually surprised when I went back to verify that, because I thought maybe it was even further back than that. But no, 1st century. I thought it might have been from either the Hittite or Assyrian time. But I was not correct on that. There's the Hagia Sophia. I'm going to be really interested when we go there to see what changes might have been made since it is now officially a mosque again. When we visited both trips, it was still, a museum. You definitely, and it was interesting because you could see both influences, the Muslim influence and the Christian influence in that. It was, this building is 1,500 years old. It was built to about 525, I think, AD, right in that time period. And it's until St. Peter's was built 1,000 years later, this was the largest domed building in the world. So.
Massive.
Oh yeah, it is huge.
Surprised it survived all those earthquakes.
Yes.
There was an interesting program a couple of years ago on PBS where they went in and the question is why? Why did it stand?
Yes. Yeah.
And stuff, and it's what they finally come up with is, you see right in front that other hemisphere, the building with the round
Yes.
dome on it, there's four of them around there, and that's what holds it up.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like the flying buttresses of some of the
Yeah.
European cathedrals then.
Look how small the people are.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's, you go to the second floor and it's like walking up to the fifth floor. There's so many steps to get up there and look out. And you can see some of the Muslim symbols in there. But on that second floor, you also see mosaics like this. So,
Beautiful.
yep.
Well, when the Muslims come in, the other thing on this program too, that they were trying to see through some of the plaster work because they plastered over a lot
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
Christian visiting.
Well, this is certainly a problem for two reasons at least. One, it's a Christian symbol, but even more importantly, probably, it's an image.
It's an image.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely beautiful, the mosaics
What
in
does
there.
the Hagia for Sophia translate?
Sophia is wisdom. I think Hagia, yes, Hagia, is saints. There's a study called Hagiology, something like that, which is a study of saints.
Oh,
So,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
That would be a Greek. Both of those would be Greek words,
So-
not.
So saints of wisdom?
Saint Wisdom basically is what it is, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Sophia would have been the goddess of wisdom to the Greeks.
Oh, okay.
But, some of those goddesses' names came in to the Christian tradition, and so Saint Sophia. There's Cappadocia with its, and this area is extensive. I just have one slide in there for this. And with all those little tops on top of the little mountains, and they dug inside them, and that's where people lived, was inside these in caves. They also dug down into the earth 5-6 stories and actually had cities underground.
Do you have any idea what they try to do to preserve them on the outside from erosion?
I'm not sure. Yeah, because you're gonna get the wind and stuff I don't know if they're doing anything to preserve. Inside they're doing a lot to try to preserve. Most of these you couldn't take pictures inside because the light would be an issue, and some of the churches there are beautifully decorated inside. Fortunately, you could buy postcards, so we bought postcards and took pictures of postcards. So I'll share some of those later. Later in the series, not later today. And then this is our, in the Paul's Footsteps in 2019. You can see, if you look back on your papers to the trip we took in 2012, we covered a lot different area this time than we had in the earlier trip. We flew into Adana. The tour used to start in Antioch, but because of the civil wars in Syria, they felt it was too uncertain to be able to fly into Antioch, and so we flew into Adana. They checked every day to make sure it was safe to go down to Antioch, which is within 5-10 miles of the Syrian border, so down in that kind of land peninsula there at the far right side. Then we came back up and went into the central part of the country to Konya is what it's called now. Iconia was what it would have been called in the New Testament time. We came down to the coast, worked our way up to places like Laodicea, Smyrna, Ephesus, Troy, and then up and several days in Istanbul. And that's Mark looking at some of the inscriptions, and in, I don't know if I've got it in any of these photos, I've got a good one of him standing on a Roman bridge, because he was so interested in the Roman roads, and so a good picture of him on the bridge. And here's a picture from that trip of Laodicea. It's one of the seven, also in addition to Paul being there, it's one of the 7 churches that got a letter in the book of Revelation. And then this is our trip that's coming up. We'll go into Istanbul. We'll then fly over to Cappadocia, and then come back and work our way down that west coast, spending time there on the Gallipolian Peninsula, and then to Troy, down to Izmir, which is Smyrna, and then to Ephesus, and down to Rhodes. Rhodes is actually Greece. Now we've entered the Greek territories at that point, on over to Crete, Santorini, Mykonos. I liked the idea that we're going to spend a couple days in both Santorini and Mykonos. There's a lot to see there, and I felt on our time, the last time we were in and out pretty quickly. Yeah, you remember that beautiful trip into the Santorini harbor.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there was excavation to the far right as you came in.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Didn't they just call that digging a hole up there? Because everywhere you dig, you're going to find something.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was ancient
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
Don't quite have that problem here.
No.
Okay, we got the empires through the ages, and if a quick glance at that, you'll be saying, wait a minute, how did this one start before the other one ended? Well, that's kind of the story of the Turkish empires, is there's a lot of overlap between them, particularly when you get into the Middle Ages. The Byzantine Empire had shared time with the Mongolian and the Ottoman empires. And almost all of these, I think, with the exception of the Hittite one, all of these, when I talk about empire, I'm meaning something a lot larger than Turkey itself. But at some point in time, all of these had Turkey as part of their provincial area. Almost forgot about the Mongol one. You see, that's not a very long one, but it covered a lot of territory. The capital at the time was Karakorum in Central Asia, but it extended all the way to Beijing, and Beijing at one point was also the capital of the Mongolian Empire. And recap some of the Hittite stuff. Prior to 1650, when the empire began, Hittites were pretty much an ethnic group that was located in lots of places in Turkey, in the Middle East, including south of Jerusalem. There was a habitation by people of the Hittite ethnicity. This picture was taken at the capital at Hatsua. The empire was broken up in 1200 by by civil wars, and the breakup resulted in several Hittite kingdoms of various names that lasted up until about the year 600 BC. And nothing was known about the Hittites until the 19th century AD, when they started doing excavation. There's not a lot of written records from the Hittites, so an awful lot of it is deduced from what they're finding as they're digging up, like the Lions Gates here. And here's where I wanted to address Gail's question about didn't they live in the interior? One of the things interesting about Turkey is the water edges pretty much were different than the interior. The water edges looked out toward the water and did their trading, did their cultural influences from the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The interior, they look to the east, so their influences are from Armenia, what's now Iraq, Iran, and heading toward India. They were getting the influences into the country from that area. And this one I saw this map and I said that's a perfect way to illustrate it, because the Hittites weren't interested in the seafaring that was going on in the Mediterranean and only extended into the country, extended out across the Asia Minor, almost ignoring the waterfronts. And there's Hatsua right in the middle, nearer to the top. See the little star on there? The Assyrian Empire, it had an old Assyrian Empire that was from about 3800 BC down through 1300s, and then what they called the Middle Assyrian Empire. The old Assyrian Empire was centered around Assur, A-S-S-U-R, the capital city. It's a city, or it's an area now in northern Iraq, and it was small. That first empire was very small and didn't include Turkey in it. So the middle, now they've extended themselves into Turkey, and then the Neo-Assyrian period was definitely covering land in Turkey. They had a list of capitals, mainly in Iraq. I'm not going to try to pronounce more of them than Assur, Nimrod, and Nineveh. I think I told you last week Nineveh is in Mosul, Iraq. That's the location. And our friend from last week in Turkey, the capital for 5 years was in Haran. And it was the capital when, after the Babylonians had conquered Assur, the Assyrian Empire tried to keep going, moving its capital from Assur to Haran, and they still fell in about 5 years, so it wasn't a long-term capital. Here are some of the folks that you would know from Old Testament. Tiglath-Pileser the third defeated Israel, which is the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes in the north, defeated them in 722. And then the next century, the 7th century, Sennacherib besieged Jerusalem and Lachish. And if you've ever been to the British Museum, it's his dining room scene that is not a mosaic, it is a relief covering several walls in the British Museum. Including, if you look, there are places where you can see them after they've sacked Jerusalem carrying away menorahs and other temple treasures. Babylonia captured Nineveh. I had said Assur was the capital at that time. Nineveh was actually the capital as the kingdom was falling apart. They captured that in 612, which is when the capital moved to Haran, and then the empire fell in 609. So actually only 3 years in Haran. And this is a picture from the Assyrian Empire, and that is located now in the British Museum, this particular statue. There's actually 2 of them in the British Museum, and you have to walk between the 2 big statues to get back into that dining room relief. And here's the Assyrian Empire. You see how at the beginning it was concentrated there in the reddish area around Nineveh and Assur, and then it eventually extended all the way down into what's now Iraq, and then up into Turkey to Haran and Carchemish, which we talked about last week, over to Tarsus, which is where Paul was born, and then down into Aleppo, which you would have heard is in the news from the Syrian civil war, and then down into the Israel area, all the way to Jerusalem and into Egypt. So a big empire there. Michelle, this is a real good picture of what the Fertile Crescent would be, and extending a little further down all the way to the Persian Gulf, but you can see why it would be called a crescent.
Yeah, before you explained this Assyria right there, I thought that was it. I had that little red dot, I thought that was it.
Yeah.
But it extends all the way up.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it started.
Yeah, that's
So your old empire and your middle empire, but then
Yeah.
it started expanding
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
to that area. And did I miss it on the slide? Hammurabi would have been part of that middle empire. Okay, Babylonian Empire. Now we're getting empires that come and go fairly quickly. Babylonian Empire, 606 to 539. It was okay. It was okay. Here's Hammurabi. He would have been in the Babylonian, not Assyrian area, but in the 18th century, 1700s BC, and I still get them mixed up, even though I studied it this week. Assyria and Babylon would have been neighbors to each other. After Hammurabi, became a small kingdom centered at Babylon. The capital was always Babylon, as opposed to Assyria, which the capital changed several times. Capital Babylonia was always Babylon. It was destroyed by Sennacherib and restored with the puppet king in 681. So it was kind of a downtime for Babylon. Assyria was weakened by civil wars and fell to Babylonia in 606. And you'll find the most famous to us king was Nebuchadnezzar II. He had a 43-year reign, and you'll find references to him in Kings Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And I don't know if you remember that Nebuchadnezzar did something to displease God, and he kind of his punishment was a mental illness, basically, and he was out eating grass like an oxen would for seven years. And I kind of brought this into more modern terms and said Nebuchadnezzar identified as a cow and had a plant-based diet. This is Babylonia at the time of Hammurabi, so you see it was not up into Turkey at this point. And if you recall the map earlier of Assyria, you can see they would have had a long border together there with Assyria taking that land that has the Tigris River flowing up into it. And I didn't notice that until I just looked at it. It has the Sumerian there in the bottom of the picture. So that's one of the two major areas that are in contention for the honor of Abraham's hometown. And this would be from the time that they were occupying Turkey. This would be from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, and you can see now it's broadened down somewhat from the crescent, gone into some of the more dry parts of the deserts of Jordan, but then also up into Turkey, taking in Haran, Carchemish, and on over into Tarsus and that southeastern part of Turkey. This is a good time to point out the Median Empire to the east, so you can see how they're bordered to each other. The Median Empire, also known as the Persian Empire, is the next one on the list to take over the area. So you can see they're just waiting their turn to the east. Persian Empire, or Median, lasted about 200 years. They had a capital in Babylon, and then 4 different ones in Iran. Persepolis is one of the areas that's been fairly heavily excavated, archaeology work done there, and we always kind of wanted to go there, but I also was not real comfortable going to Iran, so.
Yeah.
Could have been a hostage.
Yeah. I'd also like to go to Syria, the places around Aleppo and stuff. No, not happening.
Not a good idea.
Nope. Then you got 2 Cyruses from the Persian Empire. The first one captured Jerusalem, so this was the second of the 2 kingdoms to fall. So we had Israel fell 722, and then Jerusalem and Israel fell in 587. But before that, Cyrus had captured parts of Judah, and had begun exiling, taking the Jews back over into the Babylon area. And if you want to follow their route, they wouldn't have gone directly across, because it's pretty desert area there in South Jordan, what's now South Jordan. So they're not going to go straight across from Jerusalem or any place else in the Holy Land. They're not going to go straight across. They're going to have to go up and around that crescent. Cyrus II had the decree of Cyrus in 538, and here's one of the, it's called a Cyrus cylinder. You can see it when it's on display in San Francisco, I think it was, about 15 years ago, but it generally lives at the British Museum. And it does not specifically say grant religious freedom to the Jews. It grants religious freedom to general, overall religious groups. So there's a connection then between, Cyrus working with the Jewish people to send them back to the Holy Land.
Oh, so he wanted to help them out. He didn't.
Oh, he did.
Okay.
He did very definitely help them out, but it wasn't confined to the Jewish people. They had captured and brought people in from a lot of areas, and this was a declaration. You can look backwards on things and go, okay, this is something we believe, human rights and, freedom of religion and so forth. And then, was he the first one to declare that? Well, he probably wouldn't see it quite the same as we do, but it certainly was different than most folks at the time. Darius the First, you'll find, you find the biblical references in those different books. Darius was one of them, and one of the things that we did, besides, we don't always go to Turkey, we did an archaeology dig at a Roman fortification in Romania about 20 years ago, and our professor wanted us to always be thinking in context. We were, archaeology digs are dirty work. You're down there cleaning rocks, you're dusting things, and he didn't want us to have spent the kind of money that we had spent and the time that we were, and just come home with our noses full of dirt. So he made sure that every meal that we had, he was doing a teaching, and he would take us to various different sites. And that's the background story to Darius, because one of the places that he took us was on the Danube, and our dig was also at the end of the Danube as well, close to the Black Sea. But he took us upriver, maybe 30 miles, to a site where Darius was stopped by the river. That's as far as the kingdom, the empire went. He couldn't get across the river, and across the river is Ukraine. So we've seen Ukraine. We've not been to Ukraine. We've seen into it. But this particular site that the professor took us to, you could see the layers of archaeology. So 2,500 years ago, this was where Darius had an encampment and was hoping to get across the river, but didn't. And then you saw Greek, ruins above that. You saw things from the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, And finally, at the very top, you looked around and there were anti-gun emplacements because during the World War II, Romania was occupied by Germany, and across the river was the Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union. So it was very much, the front line for both sides.
4 minutes
4 minutes, oh my God.
or less. But
Okay. Well, we'll finish some of this next week. Here we go. Yeah, the Persian Empire.
I see that Persian Empire.
And then I don't have, I don't have words to say. Good timing. The Hellenistic Alexander conquered all the way over into Asia. When he died, the territory was split between 4 generals. 3 of the generals ended up with Turkish territory.
So who are the Hellenites?
The Greeks.
Greeks. Oh, okay.
The Romans were all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
In the Roman roads, this is a map that Dave found on Roman roads in Turkey. And I have the modern map of Turkey there. And you'll see that we're still using some of the same pathways. Now, some of that is dictated by the terrain, to get through some of these mountain passes. But, I can see, quite a few similarities between where the Romans put the roads and where we're still following them today.
You turn left here, turn right there, go loop-de-loop.
Yep.
Third goat on the right.
Yes. Byzantine Empire. This one is fun because this is after the fall. Well, the capital was moved from Rome to Byzantium or Constantinople by Constantine. And then after Rome fell, this is what the territory looked like. So the eastern part, and that takes in Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, southern part of Italy, and then a large, I think that pretty well covers all of today's Turkey.
Sylvia, which was the largest empire by size, by land?
It's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Mongols.
Yeah.
Mongols.
That one.
Okay.
Yeah. The Mongols, and I had said that at one point their capital was over in Beijing, but you see how they kind of came at Turkey from 2 sides. They came up, through Poland, down through Hungary, that area, and we're almost to Constantinople on the European side, and then they came a good ways across Turkey into. Yeah. So, but
Didn't last long.
didn't last long.
Oh, once Genghis died, yeah.
And then you get the Ottoman Empire. Again, this one's overlaps with the Byzantine Empire, and they lasted for looks like 7 centuries, 6-7 centuries. It's a long time.
600 years.
Here's present map of Turkey. You ask about the population. Ankara is there, almost in the center. So there are cities, populated, large cities in the center part, including Konya, which is what had been Iconia before. And I think I'll stop here and start with these couple slides next session, which is not next week.
2 weeks.
Yes, 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. If you come at 9:45, you can go right into church.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very nice.